Felt like, owners and things like that, they didn't really like, Prime and, how flashy he was. So it kind of, put a, bad stain on, Shedeur. But I think Shedeur is one of the classiest guys out there. And, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And
he's still a kid.
And that's the thing. And it's, like I said, it's too much court of public opinion. You know what I mean? You got to let the guy play.
What if one of college football's most talked about young quarterbacks never got a real shot in the NFL? Not because of talent, but because of his last name. Something strange is going on behind the scenes, and a former NFL player just stepped forward to say what a lot of people have been thinking, but were too afraid to say out loud. Phil Taylor, a former first-round pick for the Cleveland Browns, just revealed what really went down with Shedeur Sanders at Browns training camp. And according to him, the whole quarterback competition was over before it even began. No real reps. No real chance. Just a quiet decision made behind closed doors, and a player tossed aside before he could even prove himself. But this story isn't just about football. It's about legacy, it's about perception, and it's about how the son of Deion Sanders, yes, Prime Time himself, may be paying the price for his father's larger-than-life persona.
I don't think he got a fair shot. I think everybody, including coaches, media, everybody he was kind of doomed from the start just because I feel like who his father was. You know what I mean? And then that's another knock against him, saying, he's only been coached by his dad. If anything, his dad showed him the right way and the only way, and how to work hard and do things as a pro. It should be a given you would want to draft this guy. But
we're going to break down exactly what Phil Taylor said. The deeper reasons behind why Shedeur may have been benched, the rumors circulating behind the scenes, and why some fans believe this might not just be about football at all. Is Shedeur Sanders being blackballed? Or is this just the harsh reality of trying to make it in the NFL? When your last name is Sanders, most people stop paying attention after that. They see Deion and assume everything that follows is just another chapter in the same book. But that's where most people get Shedeur all wrong. Shedeur Sanders is not his father. He's not trying to be. In fact, he's been carving his own path since day one. Loud, emotional, and unapologetically himself. While his older brother Shiloh has grabbed the headlines as a defensive player, Shedeur has done his damage at quarterback, commanding offenses, making clutch throws, and making it very clear that he's not just riding the coattails of primetime.
All obviously blocked for a lot of rookie QBs in your day. You came in with Johnny Manziel in 2014, so think of the amount of rookies that you've protected since then. 2 rookies this year with Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. What's that been like? And obviously, the latter comes with a ton of attention towards the team that might not have been there in the past.
Yeah, I think both guys came in since day one, since I've seen them in there, and they've put their head down and they've worked. And I like them both, like Dillon Gabriel. I think he's like the consummate professional. Comes in, puts the work in. I think you guys have seen in the preseason games, he's taking those steps. He played
from Jackson State to Colorado. Shedeur's journey hasn't been easy. He's faced criticism, doubt, and the constant comparisons. But each time, he's delivered on the field. He throws with precision. He plays with poise. And most importantly, he has that edge you can't coach. Off the field, he's charismatic, controversial, and never afraid of a camera. But beneath the bravado is a guy who works, studies, and handles adversity without lashing out. He's never played the victim, even when the media painted him as entitled or arrogant. All of that makes what happened in Cleveland even more confusing. Because for a player with that pedigree, that work ethic, and that level of public interest, the Browns didn't just ignore him. They barely let him touch the field. And when a team like the Browns, hungry for a win, starved for consistent talent, shrugs off a chance to develop a high-upside player like Shedeur Sanders, you've got to ask, why?
In Cleveland, they really like Shedeur, but honestly, I think a lot of people, fans, coaches, people in the administration, the front office, the players, they're tired of like the silliest comments of all time. Like as a broadcaster, I would say something nice about Dylan Gabriel, and it was like I couldn't say something nice about him because it was an insult to Shedeur. And I was like, well, right now I'm talking about Dylan because he's in the game and he's throwing the ball and he's doing a nice job. And if he doesn't do a nice job, I'm going to say it as well. That doesn't mean I don't like Shedeur, because I do. I told him back in the spring, I was like, I think the Browns should draft Shedeur Sanders. I think he's got a great ceiling, could be the franchise quarterback. But it's like they're so blind to the fact that, like,
why bring him in at all if you were never going to take him seriously? And as you're about to see, Phil Taylor thinks the answer has little to do with football. On paper, it looked like an opportunity. The Cleveland Browns were heading into the offseason with question marks at multiple positions, including quarterback, and that led to one of the most talked about position battles during the camp period. Or at least, that's what they wanted people to think. According to former Browns defensive tackle Phil Taylor, that wasn't a competition. Straight up, it was smoke and mirrors. Shedeur Sanders, despite all the attention, hype, and potential, was reportedly kept at the bottom of the rotation. No significant first-team reps, no chance to develop chemistry, no time to prove he belonged. Was it a coaching decision? A front office move? Or was something deeper brewing behind closed doors? Phil Taylor didn't hold back. In his own words, Shedeur was doomed from the start, not because he couldn't compete, but because the people in charge never even treated him like he was in the running. From the coaches to the media to the decision makers upstairs, it was as if their minds were already made up. And what makes it even more sketchy? While Shedeur sat on the sidelines, the team tried to bring in Arch Manning, a name loaded with NFL pedigree, but someone who, according to reports, completely underwhelmed in his workouts. So let's get this straight. Shedeur was ignored, Arch was auditioned, and no one officially explained why either decision was made. If you're smelling something off, you're not alone. Because this wasn't just about depth charts or preseason snaps. It feels more personal. And as we peel back the layers, you'll start to see what Phil Taylor was really trying to say when he called out the franchise. But it gets even deeper when you hear why he believes Shedeur never had a real shot in the first place. When Phil Taylor spoke out about Shedeur Sanders' situation, it wasn't some vague statement. It was a direct shot at the Cleveland Browns and the entire system behind them. Here's what Taylor said, word for word. I don't think he got a fair shot. I think everybody, including coaches, media, he was doomed from the start. Just because of who his father is. That's not just criticism. That's accusation. Taylor wasn't biting his tongue, and he wasn't speaking emotionally. This was a veteran, a former first-round pick, someone who's been inside NFL locker rooms, someone who knows exactly how the politics work. And he's saying outright, Shedeur never even had a chance because the NFL doesn't want another spark like Deion Sanders lighting up its sidelines. Think about that for a moment. According to Taylor, the fact that Shedeur has only been coached by his father was held against him. Not his stats, not his mechanics, but his bloodline. And while most people would see that as an advantage, learning from a Hall of Famer since childhood, NFL decision makers apparently saw something else. Flashiness, headlines, unwanted media circus. Taylor suggests that Deion's presence, confidence, and larger-than-life image tainted how NFL scouts looked at his son. And by the time Shedeur showed up in Cleveland, they weren't evaluating him. They were already stacking judgments based on Deion. Bias, media pressure, image control. Taylor called Shedeur one of the classiest guys out there. And more importantly, he said the kid's work ethic was top tier. But none of that mattered. The decision had already been made. And if Taylor's right, this wasn't just a missed opportunity. This was a calculated shutout. But why would an NFL team go out of its way to bury a player before he even takes a snap? The answer might be even darker than you think. In today's NFL, talent isn't always the final word. Sometimes what the media thinks, What social media says and what fans expect can carry more weight than game stats. And that's where Shedeur Sanders might be fighting a battle most fans can't even see. Because here's the truth. The NFL isn't just a league. It's a brand. And brands are hypersensitive to narratives. Shedeur didn't walk into Cleveland just as a quarterback or a rookie prospect. He walked in as Deion Sanders' son, with a camera in his face, a last name that triggers headlines, and a fan base already divided over what the Sanders family represents. For some, it's charisma, energy, and disruption. For others, it's ego, flash, and too much noise. And when that's the image you carry, decisions around you stop being about you. Suddenly, your future's being debated by people who've never watched your film, or worse, already made up their minds. That's the so-called court of public opinion Phil Taylor was talking about. Teams don't just evaluate players anymore. They evaluate media image, public reaction, and locker room chemistry. And if a player enters with a polarizing name, coaches may see the risk before they see the reward. It's speculation over substance, perception over performance. And the part that stings, it's not unique to Shedeur. This happens across the league to players with baggage, even when that baggage is just a famous dad. So when you wonder why Shedeur didn't get first-team reps, or why he was treated like an outsider despite being one of the hardest workers in camp, it might have nothing to do with the actual game and everything to do with the name on the back of his jersey. But that still doesn't explain why the Browns brought him in at all. Here's the part that just doesn't add up. If the Cleveland Browns never really intended to let Shedeur Sanders compete, then why bring him in at all? This wasn't some random late-round flyer or a no-name invite. Shedeur came in with pedigree, buzz, and plenty of interest from fan bases across the country. He had already proven himself at Jackson State and Colorado, showed game-changing instincts, and brought the kind of hunger that most coaching staffs say they want. So if development was the goal, why didn't they try to develop him? If culture fit was the concern, why invite the energy of Deion's son into the building in the first place? The strangest twist. While Shedeur was sidelined, the Browns were allegedly scouting Arch Manning, another player with a famous last name, but one who, according to some reports, completely underperformed during workout opportunities. Oh, and yet he was still being considered with serious interest. So let's get this straight. Arch gets elite attention despite weakness on the field, while Shedeur's strong play and aggressive style are buried under political dust. The double standard is hard to ignore. The whispers around the league suggest that some last names open doors and some quietly close them. And what's even more telling, the Browns haven't offered any clear explanation. No public comments. No statements about depth-chart competition. Nothing to suggest a true logistical reason for why Shedeur was pushed to the background. It's treated like a non-story, except it isn't. Because behind every ignored rep, every empty stat line, and every silence from the staff is a decision. A choice to hide something or someone from view. And to many watching closely, that choice looked very intentional. But what stood out even more was how Shedeur chose not to respond. Most players in Shedeur Sanders' position would have snapped. You get invited to compete. You show up prepared. You work like your future depends on it, because it does. Then you realize you were never part of the plan. Not really. The reps don't come. The snaps don't show up on film. The coaches barely speak your name. And the media? They're too busy chasing flashier headlines. But instead of calling out the system, instead of taking to social media to air out grievances or feeding the drama with emotional interviews, Shedeur stayed quiet. He didn't spiral. He didn't rage against the franchise. He didn't try to create a moment. He let the silence speak for itself. Phil Taylor praised that. He didn't just defend Shedeur's skill, but his character. He called him one of the classiest guys out there. a rare compliment in a league full of egos and excuses. And behind that class is something you don't see on the stat sheet. A deep belief that what's meant to be will unfold on its own. God will expose what's in the dark, Phil said. And that message hit harder than people realize. This wasn't just football to Shedeur, it was destiny. And unlike many who would beg for validation, Shedeur seemed to trust that the right people would see his worth when the time was right. That kind of mental discipline, that's built. That's taught. That's prime DNA. So while the Browns may have quietly moved on, the story isn't over. Not even close. Because players like Shedeur, who carry the weight of a famous name and still walk tall without complaint, they don't fold. They evolve. And when they come back louder than ever. So where does Shedeur go from here? He's been doubted. He's been benched. And according to people inside the building, he was never even given a real chance. But here's the catch. NFL hates unfinished stories. When a player with name recognition, elite athleticism, and an entire media machine behind him doesn't make a roster, it's not the end. It's a pause, a reset, and the league is still watching closely. Scouting departments across the league have seen what Shedeur can do on tape. They've watched his growth at Jackson State and Colorado, seen the fire, the leadership, the passion. And if they ignore him now, they risk missing out on what could become one of the great comeback arcs in recent memory. There are rumors already, whispers of teams keeping tabs, waiting to see how he handles the setback. And here's the thing, how you bounce back matters more than how you enter. We've seen players who were overlooked become superstars. We've watched undrafted sleepers turn into household names. So why not Shedeur? Why not now? The real question is, does the NFL have the guts to take a second look? Or have they already decided that the surname Sanders comes with too much attention, too many cameras, or too much honesty for their liking? If Shedeur does make a comeback, and let's be honest, it's not an if, it's a when. He won't just be playing to prove he belongs. He'll be playing to prove the system got it wrong. And in a league that loves a good redemption story, this might just be the most personal one we've seen in years. In sports, legacy is supposed to open doors, not close them. When your last name holds weight, it should mean you've got access to the blueprint, the best training, the highest expectations. But for Shedeur Sanders, being the son of a legend might have done the opposite. Instead of being seen as the student of Deion Sanders, he was judged as the shadow of him. And that raises the question, is legacy truly a blessing or a curse in disguise? Some family names in the NFL are treated like royalty. Mannings, Watts, Bosas. But when the Sanders name shows up, suddenly it's too flashy, too loud, too much. Phil Taylor pulled back the curtain on a conversation that's been happening behind closed doors for a while now. If Shedeur played with a different last name, a quieter father, and less confidence, would he already be on a roster? Maybe, maybe not. But one thing's undeniable. Shedeur Sanders didn't get a fair shot. And even with the pressure, the spotlight, and the critics in his ear, he carried himself with way more maturity than most players in his position. That doesn't go unnoticed forever. Not in this league, not in this world. So now, all eyes turn back to the league. Not on Shedeur. He's already proven his part. The question is, will the NFL own what it missed, or continue pretending it didn't blink? Because legacy has power, and sometimes denying it only makes it stronger. Let me know what you think. Is Shedeur being blackballed, or was this just another case of NFL politics as usual? Drop your thoughts below. And if you believe in underdogs, comebacks, and proving them all wrong, you might want to keep your eye on Shedeur Sanders.